The wind moved over the prairie like a slow hand smoothing a blanket, and the Sweetwater answered with a low, steady murmur against its cobble bars. Elias McCrae followed the river's shoulder the way a man follows a prayer, quiet, intent, ready to listen for what the words do not say. He kept to the shade of scattered cottonwoods, their leaves clattering like little tin saints, and he read the morning sign in the damp. Beaver had been at work under the bank, where willow roots curled into the current. The water there held a pale drift of peeled chips, each gnawed to a sharp pencil. On the mud shelf, 2 slick slides gleamed where fat bodies had ferried down, and the musky, clean stink of castoreum rode the breeze. Farther up, a mound of damp mud and willow bark stood with a track pressed into it, broad as a man's palm and strong with splayed toes. Good sign. Not yesterday, but not old. He lifted his eyes and let them pass once over the land sage in gray-green pillows, greasewood low and dark, bluffs baked to ochre on the far side. The sky had that bleached, prayerful look it gets before heat takes hold. It was summer, the kind that hardens a man's blood, and the water ran lean and quick because snowfields high in the Wind River country had already given their best weeks ago. Elias touched the elk-horn handle of his knife without thinking, then the worn thong at his wrist, a habit more than a superstition, and went to one knee beside the slide to test the firmness of the mud. He was a long man, rangy, with a face the weather had carved, and there was crow in the plait of his hair, though he called no place but the trail a home. 3 winters in Crow lodges had taught him more than any white camp would have how to read the march of clouds, how to ask the ground a question and hear it answer, how to sit still long enough that birds forgot your name. He had trapped with men who had trapped with Smith, and though he'd never looked upon Jedediah's face, the stories about him moved in campfire smoke like a saint's bones paraded in holy season. Smith had walked at the front edge of maps until the paper tore, and then he walked beyond the tear, and in the end the land took him back, as it would take all men with patience enough. Elias eased along the water until the cottonwoods thinned and the river's curve broke open the view. On a low bench above the Sweetwater lay a scatter he knew at once and wished he did not. The pale geometry of boards, the sprung hoops of a wagon bow, an iron tire grinning in the grass, and bones too long, too small, sun-cracked and freckled with mouse droppings. He stopped, as a man stops on the threshold of a church, and took off his hat. The wind came soft through the stems and hummed under the splintered tongue of the wagon. He did not walk straight into the wreck. He gave it a wide circle first, letting his nose and eyes go ahead of his boots. Coyotes had worked it. Their narrow prints made a neat dance along the seam of shadow beneath a warped wagon board. Magpies had left their green-black calling cards, no fresh bear sign, no moccasin sign either. He stepped in then and knelt, careful, touching only what he had to. The small skull had a cracked seam across its crown, as if the sun itself had opened it. Against the grass lay a hand bone, each tiny joint articulated like a rosary. He had seen this before. The plains were too wide for help to run on foot, and too lean for pity to set a table. Emigrants came thinking the land would meet them halfway if they were brave and stubborn and God-fearing. The land did not bargain. Sometimes it gave, but more often it simply watched while men learned how little their wanting weighed. He found no papers, no keepsake with a name, only a woman's brooch crushed flat in a clay marble the size of a hazelnut with one side polished smooth by a child's fist. He put the marble in his possible's bag with a quiet oath to carry it far, as if distance might atone for something. The brooch he set on a stone where sunlight could touch it. He stacked more stones high and slow until a small cairn rose over the bones. Then he cut willow withes and made a ring upon the cairn crow fashion to show this spot was spoken for and should be stepped around. "Go easy," he said, not to the dead but to the wind that kept tugging at their leavings. He bowed his head and let the names of men he had known boon. Janvier, a Pawnee scout with a laugh like thunder, passed through his mind, with Smith's among them. Smith, who had gone down under a summer sun on the Santa Fe road, his maps and his Bible left astonished by the fact of it. The good die when the land is ready, Elias thought, and the bad die when it is bored. He went to the river then and drank, lying on his belly, taking the water like a beaver would, teeth against the current. The taste of silt and old mountain snow steadied him. When he pushed up, the wind shifted, and a different smell came under the cottonwoods, sour and rank, a sweetness gone wrong. Riverbank rot. He stood very still and let his ears do what his eyes could not. There it was again, a murmur not of water but of earth, a soft settling sigh as when old timbers complain in a house. He moved downstream, careful where the bank shouldered over the flow. Fresh scours marked the curve, spring freshets had undercut the sod, and the river at high run had licked away the black dirt, while the top held on like a drunk to a chair back. He crouched and saw the fault line, a shallow cave eaten into the mealy bank, roof thin as a poor man's boot sole. The weight of a good team, wagon and load, would make that roof think of quitting. He worked along the edge with a willow switch, prodding, listening. The earth answered. Not yet, its voice said, but soon. He leaned far and sniffed. The rot was stronger where the undercut reached deepest. He picked up a clod and dropped it. The hollow thump came back after a heartbeat, as if the land itself had forgotten how to hold its breath. He stepped back from the lip and looked for sign. It took him only a minute to find it on the bench above the water, where the sod ran unbroken, broad, splayed tracks pressed into the dust, dew still beating the edges. Ox, heavy and slow, 2 yoke side by side. The ground held the story clean. A freight train, not emigrant families, for the wheel ruts were deep and double-braked where loads had been held steady on a slope. The dung piles were plump and green at the center, old on the crust, and the sharp flint of hoof edges said the train was not 2 hours gone. He found the prints of men, too. Broad-heeled boots, a boy's narrow tread, and one woman's shoe with a half-moon cut in the right instep. He could read the day in these signs like a priest can read a psalm. The train had come up slow from a shallower ford below, seen the benchland as a gift, flat-going, bank-sloped, water easy to look at, and chosen the line that brought them right above the undercut. He could see where they had paused to set the wheel bands and breathe the teams. He could feel the breath of that pause in his own ribs, the quiet moment when a man thinks, "We have done well," and God smiles in agreement. Then they had moved on, east to west, toward a bend where the Sweetwater ran between taller banks and the thin roof grew thinner. He saw no sign of them having found a better crossing. No new ford churned into pale water. The line they had chosen would carry them exactly onto the shelf he had just heard whisper its bad intentions. Elias let out a long breath and tasted dust. He looked again at the wreck on the bench behind him, at the small cairn and the ring of willow. He saw the woman's brooch catching sun like an eye that does not blink. In his mind the old tales stood up. Black Elk talks. The Crow elder who had spoken to him on a winter night when stars creaked in the cold had said, "The ground speaks to a man who shuts his mouth." Elias had kept that counsel and lived, and he had kept it and watched others die too. There is no merit in silence when death is coming on iron wheels. He turned upriver, measuring the land in his step, marking the distance to the bend where the high bank failed. He counted cottonwoods, one with a lightning scar, one leaning like a broken spear, 3 smaller with roots in the river's skin. The ox prints kept him company like a fresh trail keeps a hound clear, urgent. The day was already hot at the edges, but the wind held a coolness born of snow he would never see, and in that coolness he felt time narrow to a blade. He could catch them. A man alone with a good horse and legs under him could close the hour on a wagon train, if the going stayed honest. But catching was not enough. He could ride in yelling danger like a prophet, and the train captain would raise a hand and say what captains always say to stray beaver eaters: "We take our counsel among our own." Pride outruns sense on a road where men feel the weight of wives and stores and promises. Words were cheap out here, and men had grown thriftless with them. So Elias stood on the bench with the river breathing at his back and the blown grass bowing at his knees, and he listened a last time to the earth. The quiet murmur came again, and this time it sounded like a patient thing, giving its last generosity to hold for one more hour. He tasted the rot again, the sweet under-sickness of it, and he knew, as he knew his own scars, that the shelf would go when weight asked the question. He pulled his hat tight and set his jaw. The rope coiled at his saddle horn answered his hand with the familiarity of prayer beads. He would catch the train, yes, but he would not argue. He would let the land speak in a language even a proud man could not mistake. The crow had signs a wind could not steal, and he had learned them. Elias looked once more at the small cairn and the willow ring, and then turned west, the Sweetwater keeping pace on his left, his boot soles silent on the dusty grass. "Not today," he said, to the river, to the earth, to the bright old sun burning the bones and boards behind him. "Not if a rope in a man's hands can help it." He spat to clear dust from his tongue and felt the vow form in him, simple and hard as flint striking steel. A man who sees death comin' and says naught is kin to murder. By the time the sun sat full on the rim of the world, Elias had covered near 3 miles of benchland. His horse, a rangy claybank with old scars on his hocks and the patience of a priest, moved at an easy lope, hooves whispering through buffalo grass. Elias kept his head low, eyes walking the land before his boots did. The prairie held quiet the way a church holds breath before an Amen. Ahead, dust lifted not wind-made, but wagon-made. Wide and slow, as if the earth itself had stirred its blankets. Elias reined in, squinting. There, a line of canvas hoods, pale as gull wings in the heat shimmer, crawling west like tired beetles. Oxen hunched under yokes, shoulders raw, ribs like barrel staves. Teamsters plodded with hats slouched low, and one boy walked barefoot behind a wagon, slapping dust from his feet now and again, as though that might lessen the miles. It was a freight train, sure enough not green emigrants, but seasoned haulers. The kind who had passed the Platte crossings more than once, who cussed in English and prayed in German, and could set a wagon tire with one hand and swat a mosquito with the other. 8 wagons, 16 yoke of oxen, 2 saddled mules trailing, ropes slack like lazy snakes, and above it all hung that weary, road-broke silence of folk who had long ago used up their laughter and now ran on grit alone. Elias nudged the claybank forward. "Easy, boy, we go in polite." The first drover to spy him was a Tennessee-type jaw full of chaw, shirt bleached near, white, rifle laid easy in the crook of his arm. He raised 2 fingers, not friendly, not hostile a plains greeting, which means, "I see you. Don't make me see more." Elias lifted his hand in answer. "Morning." The man spat. "You ride alone?" "Aye." "Where from?" "Sweetwater Bend." That won him a slow blink. Even fools knew a man didn't ride out from those banks idly. Not with spring undercut chewing them to lace. Elias rode closer but kept a respectful distance. Far enough a twitchy trigger hand wouldn't find excuse. "River's taken a bite ahead. Shelf's thin. You keep this trail, you'll feed ox and man to the water." That earned more faces, sunburnt narrow with suspicion. Men who'd slept under wagon bellies when storms hunted, who'd lost friends to cholera and rivers and their own folly. Hard men, but hard went both ways, brittle and dangerous when prodded. A heavy-shouldered man stepped forward, captained by the look of him. Ox-goad, tucked-in belt, beard like iron filings, coat of thick homespun. He had the stance of one accustomed to firing orders and being obeyed, not questioned. "You a trapper?" he asked. "Trapped a spell. Name?" "Elias McCrae." A murmur. The captain's brow pinched. "Heard that name at the Platte. Said you ran with Smith's stray men." "Aye, men who learned to listen to ground and sky." Elias tipped his head toward the river's direction. "Ground speaking ill up ahead." The captain drew thumb across his beard. "We ain't children. We been runnin' freights from Street Lou to Santa Fe since before you was suckin' marrow from bones." Elias's eyes did not flinch. "Then you know rivers lie sweet right before they break teeth." A few chuckles rose tight, distrustful. Wagon men did not take kindly to advice, especially from a solitary beaver eater with hair braided like a crow and a calmness that made rifles itch. The Tennessean spat again and grinned with no humor. "Next he'll tell us, Injuns taught him water-talkin' magic." Elias only shrugged. "Water talks plain to any who listen." The captain's voice hardened. "We take our own counsel. 'Preciate your concern. You ride safe, Mr. McCrae. Dismissal. Polite as a hammer." Elias looked past him, saw a woman mending torn canvas, a girl grinding coffee in a tin, that barefoot boy staring at Elias like he'd stepped from a story told under blankets. Oxen chewed cud, tails swiping flies, oblivious to the grave yawning just miles ahead. He could argue, could swear by all the saints and crow spirits, could shout doom till lungs bled. But pride in men is a stone heavier than any river rock, and once thrown on a trail, it doesn't lift easy. "I said my piece," Elias murmured. "But recall what I said when your wheels smell wet and earth answers hollow." He turned the claybank. The captain called after him, irritation sharp. "You take us for fools?" Elias didn't look back. Never. Only mortal. He rode 100 yards before stopping to study the land the way sun-baked grass to color of old scalp locks, the faint rumble underfoot like a buffalo herd far off. No buffalo now. Just the river gnawing unseen. He touched the horsehair rope coiled at his saddle horn. Words had failed as he knew they would. Now the rope would speak. And in the sighing wind, as grass bowed and the Sweetwater whispered of collapse, Elias set his jaw and whispered the vow again, low and iron. A man who sees death comin' and says naught is kin to murder. He would not be kin to that. Not today. The wind shifted north by west, bringing the clean bite of snowmelt from far peaks. Elias breathed it in, slow, like a man tasting old truth. The wagons creaked behind him, somewhere canvas whispering, iron rings clinking, tired voices calling gee and haw to beasts who had long stopped caring for human syllables. Pride had turned those men deaf. The river would teach them soon enough, unless a single rope could speak louder. He slid from the saddle beside a clump of chokecherry and let the claybank graze. From his possibles bag he drew out a coil of rawhide rope, stained dark from seasons of sweat, beaver blood, pine pitch, and rain. Twined within it ran strands of horsehair black, long, braided fine as a nun's rosary, a crow braid, a winter's patience burned into cord. Knowledge passed between hunters by firelight when the wind howled and wolves sang on distant ridges. He knelt in the grass and steadied the rope across his knees. Black Elk Talk's voice came back to him memory. Not madness, teaching, not haunting. There will be times, elk brother, when tongue is weaker than wind. Men with ears like stones will not hear. When danger walks and words fall, you leave a sign the wind cannot steal. Old Croways had a code, simple, sharp, knots and dangles, plaits and tassels that spoke, warnings without sound, a tight double knot for sickness in camp, a horsehair tassel for death near, a crow feather tie for enemy trails ahead. And one pattern rarer than all, ground treachery, earth hungry, do not pass. It was for ice that cracked, for marsh that masqueraded as meadow, for riverbanks hollow as lies. And once, by the Yellowstone, Elias had seen it used to stop a crow hunting party short of a snow-cracked canyon ledge that would have swallowed them whole. Words fly, the elder had said, but cord remembers. Elias set to work. The motions were old. Fingers worked on memory, not thought. He split the rawhide strands and rewove them, binding horsehair inside like a heartbeat. Every few thumb lengths he tied a crow's head knot, tight, sharp, a little ugly by design. Between each knot he threaded short tassels of horsehair, 3 in a row at the center, the middle tassel longer. To an ignorant eye, it was decoration. To anyone who knew the old sign talk, danger beneath, ground false, turn back or your bones join it. When he finished, sweat beaded his temple, though the wind still carried the chill of higher snows. He rubbed a bit of river mud along the rope to darken it, give it age, authority. Men feared old warnings more than fresh ones. Fresh ones felt like panic. Old ones felt like prophecy. He stood and walked to the trail. The ox tracks cut clear through the grass, ribboning ahead toward doom. Elias drove 2 willow stakes into the ground at either side and strung the rope low across the wagon trace, taut as a fiddle string. He added a willow stave angled across the path, its leaves still wet with morning breath. At the rope's midpoint he hung a buffalo rib he'd carried since winter, a piece of a bull found frozen upright in snow, a sign of stubborn death. To crow eyes, rib and rope together said, "Earth eats flesh here." To the wagon men, it might read only as strange trapper foolishness, but they would stop. Men might mock, words, but they slowed for mystery. He stepped back, studying the work. No breeze could lift it, no hoof could miss it. The land around lay quiet, but not peaceful, rather like a congregation waiting to see if a sinner would repent. His horse lifted its head, ears stiff, not at the rope, but at the river's mutter. Beneath the sound of water moving over stone, Elias heard the faint, steady crumble of earth giving itself back to current. Not loud yet, not final, but close. He murmured a crow phrase under his breath, "Se pakshi ichipa." Earth waits hungry. Then in English, soft as prayer, "Rope, talk for me." He mounted up, loose-reined, scanning the horizon. The wagons would be along soon. He had no mind to stand in the trail like a supplicant. Pride was flint. Best let the rope strike the spark. Still, a sliver of doubt pressed him. Men chased gold, God, and glory across these plains. They did not always heed quiet signs, especially ones they could not read. He tightened his cinch and spoke to the claybank. If pride was meat, wagon men never starve. But the vow still lived in him, steady as pulse. A man who sees death coming and says naught is kin to murder. He had not stayed silent. He had left a sign the wind could not steal. If they broke it, mocked it, walked past it, then death's burden was on their own shoulders. Still, he did not ride far. Pride or not, he would watch. He guided the claybank up a low rise dotted with sage, settled among the brush, and waited. Rope across the trail below, river gnawing its secret teeth to his left, sky vast and pitiless above. Somewhere far behind him, wheels creaked, yokes strained, men cursed flies. A fiddle note drifted lonely and lost in the wind. Soon the prairie would choose between rope or bones. And Elias McCrae, alone as any prophet in the wilderness, fixed his eyes on the trail and the rope that held back a grave. Storm wasn't rain at first. It was silence that heavy, waiting hush plains know before the sky remembers its power. Elias crouched low among sage, his claybank shifting weight beneath him, ears pricked. The freight wagons creaked closer, a plodding chain of wood, hide, and human will grinding against distance itself. The first ox yoke appeared over a low swell, hulking, slate-backed shapes topped with ribs and stubbornness. Leather traces creaked. Drivers muttered. The boy still walked barefoot, dust soft as flour around his ankles. A woman's bonnet bobbed by a wagon wheel, hand steadying a milk pail that swung like a church bell in slow motion. They trudged in that long frontier trance steps, so tired they became prayer and punishment both. Elias whispered to the wind, "Rope, hold 'em." Rope speak. The rope stretched across the trail below like a snake sunning itself, low, tight, still, horsehair tassels fluttering faint as moth wings. The buffalo rib glowed bone-white where sun caught it. The lead oxen halted first, not from fear, but confusion. Oxen did not know prophecy, but they respected barriers. Their great stupid heads lifted. They snorted. A yoke creaked. "Whoa there!" The lead driver barked, hauling back on the goad. The train compressed behind, wagons stacking like river ice, jammed against a bend. "What in the devil's this?" a teamster muttered. Men gathered, dust swirling around boots. Skepticism rolled over them like thundercloud shadow. The captain dismounted, jaw set. He crouched, touching the rope. Horsehair, knots, tassels. A buffalo rib. "Some trapper sign?" one man asked. "Some Indian witch cord?" Another spat. "Could be them crows trying to spook us south. Indians don't warn," another snapped. "Indians kill quiet." They muttered like wolves nosing a trap. The barefoot boy stared longest. His eyes slid from the rope to the river. He listened, actually listened. Elias saw it, a flicker of instinct untouched by pride. "Pa," the boy whispered, tugging the captain's sleeve. "Ground's hummin'." The captain swatted the hand away, irritation sharp. "Ground don't hum, boy. Men do when they ain't workin'." He hooked the rope with his boot and shook it. The earth answered. A long, low groan rolled through soil and root, like a tired beast warning it would not bear another load. Every ox froze, heads rose, flanks trembled. They felt it deep in bone, that ancient animal knowing. A woman clutched her shawl. "James?" she whispered to a man beside her. "I don't like this." The captain straightened, face flushing red with the shame of doubt. "We ain't turnin' back because some crow-lovin' trapper strung fancy string across a trail." He moved to yank the rope by hand. Elias's heart punched once hard. The claybank stamped. Elias rose in the saddle like a man pulled up by fate itself. "Hold!" he barked, voice cracking across the prairie like musket fire. Rifles swung toward him. The world narrowed, river whisper. Wind hush, eyes hard as frost. The captain glared up the slope. "You again." Elias didn't blink. "Step off that trail." The captain spat. "You threatenin' me, mountain man?" "No," Elias said, calm as flint. "The earth is." Silence. A hawk cried somewhere high, lonely, old as the world. The boy's face had gone white. He tugged his father's sleeve again, trembling. "Pa, please." The captain's jaw worked. Pride fought sense. Pride nearly won. Then the ground spoke final. A crack sharp, clean broke the air. Sod split at the bank edge like cloth tearing. Dirt sloughed. Willow roots snapped with pistol crack sounds. The earth shelf sank, slow then sudden, dumping a slab of prairie into the Sweetwater below. Water surged, brown and violent, like a grave swallowing hard. Oxen bawled, women screamed. Men stumbled back, as if death had swung a scythe inches from their throats. Silence fell again, but this time it was not storm silence. It was survival silence. After judgment, silence. The captain stared into the collapse, knuckles white on his goad, sweat running cold through beard. Elias guided the claybank down the slope, slow as law descending a pulpit. Dust followed him like incense smoke. He halted before them, hat shadowing his eyes. "A rope stood between you and the book of the dead," he said quietly, and the rope held. No one lifted a rifle now. Pride lay drowned with that riverbank. The barefoot boy whispered, voice small as a sparrow's breath. "Pa," the rope spoke. The captain swallowed, throat working. "I misjudged you." Elias didn't smile. The land didn't bargain in smiles. He dismounted, touched the rope, then the earth beneath it, reverent. "Learn this," he said, voice like a prayer carved in stone. The plains whisper. Rivers warn. Only fools call quiet wisdom cowardice. Thunder rolled. Distant real storm coming now. Oxen stomped, uneasy. The earth still trembled, faint underfoot. Elias coiled the rope slow, like lifting a relic. "Rest your beasts upstream," he said. "Find higher ford by the cottonwood scar. 2 miles. Slow climb, firm bottom." The captain nodded, chastened. A woman crossed herself. The boy stared at Elias like he'd seen Moses command water. Elias mounted once more, eyes on the drifting storm front. "You live today," he murmured. "Not because of me, because you listened in time." And then he rode, rope warm against his saddle horn, heart heavy with the weight of those bones he'd buried, prayer in his blood. A man who sees death comin' and says, "Naught is kin to murder." He had spoken, the land had answered, and the Sweetwater greedy patient flowed on, denied today but never forever. Evening came slow, as if the sun too were weary from watching men test death and blink first. Pink settled over the far mountains, and the sky bruised purple above the cottonwoods lining the Sweetwater. The freight train had moved off the dangerous shelf, now camped among level ground where sage and greasewood held the soil firm. A cook fire popped, tin cups clinked. Somewhere a fiddle tested a quiet string, but the laughter that normally rises with supper on the plains did not come. Not tonight. Pride had been eaten, and humility sat heavy as stew in a Dutch oven. Elias watched from a distance at first, tethering his claybank near a patch of rabbit brush where he could keep the camp in sight. He wasn't sure if they wanted him near, and he never forced company. The plains taught a man to walk soft and enter humbly, or not enter at all. The boy found him first, bare feet, hair in a ragged cut, compass-eyed and solemn. He approached as if one wrong step might undo the world. Elias pretended not to see him until the boy cleared his throat. "Mister." The voice was thin but steady. "Ma says supper's ready if you'd care to eat." Elias tilted his head. "Your ma thinks me worth feedin'?" The boy nodded, earnest as sunrise. "Says a man who pulls another off a cliff edge deserve a bowl, even if he don't want one." Elias snorted a small sound, but the closest thing he offered to a smile most days. "She's right, wise. Go on ahead, I'll come." The boy scampered back, relief bright in his stride. Elias followed slow. He paused at the place where the land had given way. The fresh-cut earth, roots hanging like stringy beards, told the story clear. Had they gone on, oxen would have dropped first, yokes twisting, wagons tipping like gravestones falling. Men and women would have been dragged screaming into the river, swept under where the current churned dark pockets against stone. Bones in grass, like the ones he buried, children's marbles lost in dust. He touched his hat brim, a habit of respect, then turned toward camp. When he stepped into firelight, men fell silent, not hostile, just measuring him. Again, but differently this time. The captain stood, cleared his throat, and nodded him toward the fire. "We ain't got much," he said, voice low. "But what there is, you're welcome to." Elias lowered himself to a stone by the flames. A tin plate appeared with beans, biscuits tough enough to double as leather, and a chunk of salt pork. He ate slow, savoring the honest work in the food. One woman, gray-streaked hair tied back beneath her bonnet, sat nearby mending a child's shirt. She watched him with quiet study. "It true what they say?" she asked. "You lived with Indians?" "Aye. Crow lodges, wintered 3 seasons." Her needle paused. "They teach you that? Rope warnin'?" He nodded once. "Among other things. Crow no land, like preachers know scripture, only they listen, and earth answers honest." A murmur rippled around the fire. Curiosity, not scorn. The captain sat opposite, elbows on knees. He looked older now, less iron, more man. "I misjudged you," he admitted, his voice rough. "Thought you was stirrin' fear where none belonged." Elias shrugged. "Fear's a tool like any other, better sharpened before need comes." A chuckle bubbled near the fire, relief. Men who had seen their graves and walked back seldom held on to pride. Long fear had wrung it from them. The boy from earlier crept closer, holding Elias's rope across both palms like offering bread at altar. "Sir, is it magic?" the boy whispered. Elias shook his head. "Only eyes and patience. Rope can't see the earth breaking, but it tells men to stop and look." He tapped the boy's brow lightly. "Magic's in here, between ears." The boy grinned, wide and gap-toothed. Then his face sobered. "Will you teach me?" Elias studied him a long moment. "You listen to ground when you walk?" The boy nodded. "Pa says I hear too much and talk too little." "Then you're halfway there." Elias took the rope and demonstrated a knot crow's head knot, tight and mean. This knot says danger in the earth, you make it clean, and men might listen when words fail. The boy's tongue poked from the corner of his mouth as he tried. His first knot came out crooked as a drunk mule. Elias straightened it, gentle but firm. "Try again. Land don't give second warnings often." The captain watched in silence, pipe seed between his teeth. At last he said, "Ain't seen a thing like that rope sign in all my years." Elias glanced into the dark beyond camp. The river whispered its endless sermon. Coyotes tuned their night hymn on the far ridge. "There's older knowing than books or maps," he said. "Older than us, older than plow or musket or steel wheel." His gaze stayed on the dark horizon. "Mountain don't care if man forgets, river don't remind twice." Murmurs of agreement moved like wind through sage. A tin cup passed his way. Coffee thin, bitter, perfect. Elias drank, grateful. No coin could buy what fire and coffee meant out here. One teamster lifted his cup in quiet salute. "To the rope that saved us." Another raised his bread. "To the man who knew to use it." Elias only nodded, throat tight. Praise sat awkward on a man who lived by silence and wind. The boy leaned close, eyes bright in fire glow. "What will you do now, mister?" Elias stared into the flames, seeing the Sweetwater's restless cut, the bones he'd buried, the long road beyond tomorrow. "Move on," he murmured. "Skies wide, trails long, and death don't tire none." He stood, brushing dust from his coat. "But not tonight. Tonight I'll share your fire till it sleeps." The boy smiled. The captain inclined his head. The wind breathed cool across camp, stirring sparks skyward like tiny spirits freed. Elias sat again, rope coiled in his lap, and let the warmth soak into cracked hands. Around him, voices softened, children drifted to sleep, oxen huffed in dream-chewing, the Sweetwater rolled on, its hunger held at bay for one more dusk. Humbled men, warm fire, and the wide Wyoming dark, it was enough. For now, night laid itself over the Sweetwater like a great black buffalo robe, thick and heavy and edged in stars. The fire in the freight camp burned low, its coals pulsing red as a warrior's heartbeat beneath ash. Men spoke softer now, their earlier fear settled into the kind of quiet that only brushes the plains after death has passed close enough to touch your coat. Elias sat a little apart, back against a wagon wheel, hat brim low. He was not a man used to company. Men were weather, sometimes warm, sometimes deadly, always changing, but campfires were steady, and tonight there was one to share. The boy whose rope knot he had corrected lay curled next to his mother's skirts, eyes half-lidded, though he fought sleep like a pup, afraid to miss a hunt. His small fingers still worried the practice rope Elias had given him, a strip of deer, sinew, and horsehair he would not lose even in dreams. Across the fire, two freight men argued in lazy whispers about whether the Platte or the Arkansas made better crossing in flood season. Someone whittled by lantern light. Somewhere beyond camp, oxen shifted, huffing warm breath into the chill. One of the women, the same who'd offered him supper, stepped close, holding a tin cup. "Coffee's still hot, if you'd like it." Elias accepted with a nod, obliged. She lingered a moment, shawl tight around her shoulders. The wind teased gray strands loose from her bonnet. "I've known men talk fine about the Lord's providence," she said softly, "yet speak ill of the land he made. Foolishness, that. Land's a sermon, if a body listens." Elias sipped. "God writes in dirt as sure as in book pages." Her eyes warmed. "You talk like you've been alone a long spell. Company of windsuits a man who likes his thoughts unbothered." "Aye," she smiled, "but thoughts'll starve without other voices, now and again." Then she left him to the fire. A fiddle scratched a slow tune, low, somber, like something born from the Missouri's morning fog. A freighter hummed along, that lonely frontier song, rising, hanging, falling. Elias closed his eyes. He'd heard it at rendezvous, sung by mountain men cradling tin cups and winter scars. Heard it in crow lodges, where the words were different, but the ache was the same, a yearning shaped like the horizon itself. After a while, the captain shifted closer. No pride left in him now, only the plain weariness of a man who'd glimpsed the grave and backed away humbled. "McCrae," he began slow, "I'm not a man who likes to owe debt, but I do." Elias looked into the fire. "You owe none." "Still," the captain insisted, "you saved a dozen souls today, maybe more. I'd buy that rope off you, if you're willing to part with it." He extended a handful of silver, $50. Elias didn't so much as glance at the coins. "Can't trade what ain't mine to sell. Rope's crow truth. Only gift I have is to pass teachin' on." The captain let the coins fall back into his palm, eyes lowered. He nodded once. "Teachin', aye, worth more than silver and twice as heavy." Silence again, but softer, easier. A thin voice drifted from the boy, half asleep. "Mister, would you tell a story? Not one of danger. One with mountains. Big ones." Elias's mouth twitched. "Mountains don't make gentle stories." "Please?" the child murmured, already slipping into dreams. So Elias spoke quiet, slow, like smoothed river rock rolling down memory's river. "Winter up the Big Horns," he began. "A storm came down that sounded like heaven-tearing cloth. Snow so deep you could lose a horse in it. Firewood, wet as a drowned rat. But crowfolk, they don't curse cold. They walk into snow like into church." Voices stilled. Even the fiddle rested its bow. They dug shelters in drifts, lit little fires with dry bark they carried from the fall, sang to keep breath warm. When a man froze, they wrapped him in buffalo hair and whispered prayers over him, but they never feared the white silence. See, to Crow, winter is a teacher. It strips away lies and pride and shows what you are without noise. He paused. Flames crackled, sparks lifting like tiny spirits to the stars. One old woman, he continued, gave me her robe that winter, though she had none spare. Said I was skinny as a willow in spring, and the wind would snap me like one too. He lifted his buckskin collar slightly. Still carry a strip of that robe sewn in here. A hush fell, respectful as Sunday morning. Then a freighter asked, tentative, You ever think of settling with them? Taking a crow wife? Planting roots? Elias looked into the fire so long the man thought he wouldn't answer. I did, he whispered finally, but rivers don't live in just one bend. The fire popped. Somewhere, a coyote barked twice. The captain exhaled slow. You ride with us tomorrow? No. Elias drank the last of his coffee. Trails long, and men ought learn to choose safe ground on their own feet. The boy, fully asleep now, murmured a dream word, something like river, rope. Elias rose. Stars wheeled like frost, hammered into heaven. His shadow stretched long behind him, merging with camp and prairie alike. Thank you, the captain said simply. Elias nodded once. Not me. Rope talked. River warned. You listened. He walked toward his horse, boots whispering over grass, and as he mounted, he cast one last look toward the camp, the soft glow of firelight, silhouettes huddled near flame. The boy curled around his practice rope like a cub clutching a talisman. Somewhere out there, men thought they conquered wilderness. But the truth Elias knew, was that the wilderness allowed men to pass only when it pleased. Tonight it had allowed, tomorrow it might not. With the fire at his back and the night in his lungs, Elias McCrae rode into the dark, the rope at his saddle horn, the wind low and reverent, as though the plains themselves whispered a benediction to a man who had listened long enough to belong to no one and no land but the wild itself. Dawn did not break it breathed. A pale hush seeped in from the east, not light so much as promise. The Sweetwater lay quiet, its banks innocent once more, as if the river had forgotten its hunger of yesterday. But Elias knew rivers remember in their own manner. They forget nothing. They simply bide time, patient as wolves shadowing a herd. The freight camp stirred behind him, slow, reluctant, men shaking sleep from bone and pride alike. Elias had camped just beyond their circle, where the fire glow faded into wild dark. He liked edges. Edges told truths. A fire's heart tells comfort. It's fading. Border reminds you, comfort can go out like a snuffed candle if wind decides so. He cinched his saddle as the first wagon bells clinked. Canvas rustled. Someone's pan clanged. A woman called to a child to mind the coffee kettle. It sounded almost like any frontier morning, except voices carried a gentleness earned only after meeting death's cold glance and turning aside. The barefoot boy trotted up, hair wild, rope knot clutched tight like spoils of a holy relic. "Mister, look!" He held up the rope, and though it was still crooked, the pattern was clearer. I practiced all night. Ma nearly boxed my ears for fidgetin', but I done it. Elias examined the knot. "Reckon you'll get it yet. Takes winters, takes patience." The boy squared his narrow shoulders. "I got winters in me." "Aye," Elias said, voice soft. "I reckon you do." He handed the rope back, closing the boy's fingers over it. "Keep this close. Some day you'll hear Earth speak. Don't shame yourself pretendin' you didn't." The boy nodded solemn, as though accepting some frontier baptism. Then he ran back to camp, hollering, "Ma," he said, "I got winters." Elias's lips twitched. A few wagon men approached to nod thanks stiff, but true. The woman with the gray-streaked hair pressed hardtack and dried apples into his hand, as though mothering were an instinct that refused to sleep even on the frontier's ragged edge. Last came the captain. He removed his hat not as a gentleman greeting a lady, but as a soldier salutes a grave. "We owe you our lives." Elias shook his head. "I don't take owing, nor debt. You listened. That's what saved you." The captain chewed that, then offered his hand. Elias took it, a long, solid shake, two men acknowledging a thing that did not need naming. "You ride on?" the captain asked. "Aye, trail keeps going." Elias glanced toward the far ridge where sky leaned down to kiss sage and stone. "Always. Does. Wish you'd ride with us a while. Could use eyes like yours." Elias looked toward the river, where fresh bank scars still wept sand into the current. Men walk roads. I follow waters. The captain nodded slowly. Some men chase their life, some are chased by it. He didn't ask which Elias was. Before he turned to leave, Elias added, voice low, "When you reach the Platte, take the North Ford. South's choked with drift and false bottom this season." The captain blinked, caught between gratitude and wonder. "How in God's name do you know that?" Elias shrugged. "Wind told me." "And a goose flight I seen 3 days past." The captain opened his mouth, closed it, then simply said, "Safe travel. You too." Elias swung into the saddle. As he turned his horse toward the swelling day, a breeze kicked up light at first, then fuller, carrying the scent of distant pine and snowmelt. It combed through the child's hair, through wagon canvas, through Elias's braids. The land itself exhaled. Hoofbeats sounded behind. The boy again breathless, cheeks pink. "Mister, wait!" Elias reined in. The boy held up something small, a glass marble, blue and white, swirled like a frozen eddy of river water. "I found this by the wagons," he said. "I want to give it to you, so you remember us." Elias stared at it. A marble, a child's toy. Another one had lain in dust beside bones not 24 hours before. He took it with gentle thumb and finger. "I'll carry it, far as wind lets me." The boy nodded, proud and earnest. "Someday I'll know rope signs good as you, maybe better." Elias gave him one long, steady look, measuring the boy against the horizon, weighing the shape of his future. "Don't aim to be better than another man," he said. "Aim to hear truth when it whispers, hardest thing a man learns." The boy nodded again, not understanding yet, but storing the words somewhere deep, where, one day, pain and wind would carve their meaning clear. Elias wheeled the claybank toward open country. The sun rose to greet him, gold and unforgiving. Behind him wagons creaked, life trudging west in measured hope. Ahead stretched land untouched, raw and endless, waiting to test whoever dared cross it. Elias touched the marble once, then the horsehair rope hanging at his saddle. Crows cried far off. Sage brushed his leggings. The Sweetwater glimmered like a silver rib through the ribs of the land. He rode on. No song, no farewell, just hoofbeats joining the heartbeat of the plains. For though men might forget, the land remembers every bootstep, every bone, every warning whispered into wind. And somewhere behind him, a boy practiced knots. A rope spoke once on the Sweetwater. Someday, somewhere, it would need to speak again.